Hello, you're watching The Shift Asia. Frida Liu here. Herculean Climate Solutions, or HCS, is a company focused on finding new ways to capture, avoid, abate, or sequester carbon dioxide at industrial scale sufficient to measurably positively impact the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, and their work has taken them from plantations, rigs to reefs. In 2019, HCS won the Climate Launchpad Next Big Thing Award with a project that became 𝗖𝗿𝗄𝗂𝗂. Okay, anyway. And I'm here with Steve Willis to find out a bit more about what HCS does. I won't say name in full because it was really long. But how did you get into starting this company though, Steve?
Good morning. So I'm a chemical engineer and I've been based here in Malaysia for 18 years. And the first 9 or 10 years was working with the oil and gas companies doing environmental work for them. So there's a number of environmental challenges they have, and it was a really interesting apprenticeship in many ways. And when the oil price went down about 8 years ago, we were all released. And since then, I've been doing a bunch of consulting and some innovation work and a period of contract invention that we did with an American company. So they had these challenges that they would provide, and they would send them over, and we'd work out some things that would work for them. So that was the pre-foundation to where the idea came from. So a lot of the projects that they were working with were either factory related or environment related. And one of the projects we did, which was about generating water from the air, was accidentally a massive climate solution. So we worked on this and we're thinking, okay, this will probably work. Yeah, it's a great idea. And then we realized that if you just pushed it a bit further, you could pull the CO2 out of the atmosphere. Completely different approach, you know. And we haven't actually developed it, but we ended up with this system where you think, well, that is incredible that we've stumbled across this huge solution without actually trying. So we found this big solution. So at that point, we were already focusing more on climate-related things. We think, well, we'll focus exclusively on finding the large-scale solutions that will fix the climate crisis, so the multi-million-ton solutions that are big enough to deliver the CO2 drawdown and the soil replenishment and all of the other things that need to be done, but at very, very large scales, so industrial scales, the scales at which the damage was done. So if the damage is to be undone, it needs to be done at the same scale at which it was done in the first place.
Okay. And I was looking at your LinkedIn, and your company assesses projects using 3 simple questions. Will it work? Will it do 1 million tons? Is it a negative emission? So why are all these 3 factors important?
Yeah. So we, as innovators, so engineering is a very innovative process, although it's also very dry and dull at the other end. So you've got these 2 contrary positions. And when we're looking at a possibility, we are completely restrictions off. So anything you like, play the yes and game. It's really generous and open. And then when we have something that looks like it kind of might work, and you start picking at it with the, will this actually physically work? So if you were to do this process, whatever it is, can you buy a pump or a motor which is big enough to do that? Is there an existing piece of equipment that would do it? So that is the, will it actually work? So is the science real? Have you pretended a piece which can't work? Then is it actually physically buildable? So we've come across a lot of cases where people have aspirations to do things, particularly with carbon credits, and you realize very quickly that they've misunderstood, and they're about 4 orders of magnitude out. So they're talking about kilos instead of tons. And so they're massively away from whatever can be delivered. So that's the will it work piece, overlapping into the is it big enough? Will it do 1 million tons? So if you are trying to do things based on house plants, you're never going to get to the
million.
Because you can't get enough house plants. You have to look for things which will scale to a useful, deliverable organization, and then can be photocopied around the world. So a lot of what we've looked at is plantation scale, industrial fishing scale, concrete cement industry
Okay.
kind of scale. So really, big stuff. And because all of those industries need to, they won't disappear overnight. They need to transition into a new thing, which will be part of a new future. So they need to grow and evolve and change and become part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Okay, and let's talk about some of your projects, right? And one of which is an oil rig. Can you tell us about the work done with this oil rig?
Yeah, so it overlaps with your later question, the ocean orchard question. So back in my old job, I used to go out to the oil platforms, helping them solve some of their environmental problems. And when you when you go there as a visitor, it's absolutely fantastic experience that you can't buy because you can't go. You have to go there to do a job, and most people are going there to work, and they're not looking at the thing as an environmental opportunity. They're going there to work.
Right.
But when you stand on the deck and look down into the water, there's this huge collection of fish living around you. So it's like being on the inside of an aquarium, where you're on the little castle and all the fish are swimming around you. And it turns out that the oil rigs are the most abundant marine habitat in the world. So there's a really interesting piece of research done by a Californian organization, which looked at an existing real natural coral reef and compared it to the life on a oil rig. And the oil rig is 18 times more abundant than the natural coral reef because it's a multi-story super habitat with lots and lots of different things taking place at different levels.
Wow. Is this the Ocean Orchards project?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the things sort of like linked together.
Okay, and you've also done some work with WWF.
Yep. Yeah, so the WWF project we did just a bit before COVID, and that was really interesting actually. So they started a competition to look for solutions to deal with the forest fires and peat fires in Southeast Asia. So you may remember back in 2015 or 16 or whatever it was, the haze was really bad. And that year, Indonesia, or the forests in Indonesia, released 1.6 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, which is like 6 Malaysias. So massive release.
Right.
Excuse me, for no economic benefit at all. So even the guys who were, had started off clearing a piece of land to grow, vegetables in, they suffered terribly from it anyway because they were living in all of this haze. So it's a very interesting challenge. And our conclusion was that there are actually quite a lot of ways of dealing with the fires and the firefighting, and some of which are social and some of which are very technical, and that oddly the biggest opportunity for firefighting is with the shipping industry. So the shipping industry has a massive CO2 release. They burn heavy fuel oil, running their ships back and forth across the ocean. It's very difficult for them to change away from that fuel, but they still have the emission. And it seemed that the logical thing to do is for the shipping companies to say, okay, we've got this emission. We're going to keep that emission for the next 15 years, and we're going to take the money that we were going to spend on trying to change away from that, and we're going to put out peat fires instead. Because that's an emission, and this is an emission. This is hard. That's, relatively straightforward compared to this one, and it has no money going into it. So we can take the money that we would have used on R&D for other fuels, and we can spend those hundreds of millions of dollars putting out peat fires instead. So we've had a few interesting conversations along those lines.
So what's so interesting to all the different projects you worked on, and this is the engineer, and I understand that the engineer has written a book in a novel-like kind of way, right? And your book, 𝗏𝗏𝗏, A Novel of Climate Optimism, is a prize winner in the 2023 Green Stories and Novel Prize. There's 2 books, right? And we'll talk about it, but what's the premise of 𝗏𝗏𝗏?
So 𝗏𝗏𝗏 is about a young Malaysian engineer, and she starts her first job on a massive climate adaptation project in Penang.
Right.
So it's about adaptation and restoration. So you're dealing with the different aspects of the climate issue. So the Penang aspect is really quite interesting because Penang already suffers from flooding, as you know. And what is Penang going to do if there's a metre of sea level rise or 2 metres of sea level rise? And talking to people who are actually studying this closely, the IPCC numbers are underestimates of what they're expecting to see. So the sea level rise could actually be quite severe, so alarmingly severe. So Fairhaven follows Grace Chan, she's the protagonist. It follows her career from Penang and into the Ocean Orchards project, which we write into Fairhaven, and then some of the other projects. So the other big topic that we explore is the refreezing of the Arctic. So the Earth has always had, in recent millennia, has had ice on the top of the world, and the ice reflects a lot of energy back out into space. But as the ice melts, that energy gets stuck into the sea instead, and you end up with even more rapid warming. So it's a bit of a rapid degeneration, unfortunately. But there are 4 teams now working on actually refreezing the Arctic, and the principle is really quite simple. You go up there with like a large ice-hardened tug, and you use the existing firefighting pumps that are on the tug to pump water from the sea and onto the freshly formed ice. So you turn thin sea ice, which forms naturally, into thick sea ice, which will last several years. And if you can rebuild the multi-year ice, you're in a position where you can re-expand the ice.
So the book, though, it takes you on a journey in a novel, like so that people can understand it more. And you were sort of like, I think you use the antithesis to Don't Look Up, the movie.
Right? It's quite funny, this really. I mean, several people have asked me, what's the ambition? Where are you going to go here? So we ultimately wrote Fairhaven for people who don't read books. Because there's an awful lot more of them than people who do read books. And you mentioned Don't Look Up on Netflix, and the magic wand solution, the long-term aspiration, is to get Fairhaven made into a series by somebody like Netflix. To explore what can be done if we really try hard to fix the climate crisis.
So a bit more positive as opposed to negative.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we want to do a thing, we need to imagine it. And if we can't imagine a decent future, we're not going to get a decent future. So Fairhaven is written as a positive outcome, solution-focused story to help people think, there's all these people in this story, and I can be some of these, and that's the career I want to have. That's where I want to put the effort of my life.
It is interesting because it's also based on some of the projects you worked on and trying to put it together into a story and trying to get people to say what is possible, Because with the work you're doing, we're always talking about the doom and gloom, And what are some things you're positive about, and what else can we do, to improve? I think us as individuals, us as organizations, what would you like to see happening?
Well, it's quite interesting. I was asked this question a couple of weeks ago, about what are the individual actions. And at the end of the day, the protagonist in the story is an individual and has taken action to say, I'm going to do the biggest things I can find. And there's a lot of discussion about, people reducing their carbon footprints and so on. And I have probably a bit of a confrontational view of that. My personal view is that, you have a carbon footprint, and by whatever means, you should deal with that and to get it to zero. But it doesn't stop there. It starts there. So the very minimum, you should cover your own footprint. And there are lots of ways of doing that. And once you've covered your own, you need to cover your immediate family, and then your rather larger family, and then your street, and your company, and your county, and just keep pushing out that ring of, how much of the carbon am I dealing with for these people? Because many of the people aren't even aware that it needs to be done. And if you're in a position that you've worked out that it does need to be done, it partly becomes your responsibility to take on as many people as you can. you saying I've dealt with mine, I'm all right, Jack, is abandoning your duty to deal with as much as you possibly can.
And I think it starts with you, and then at least with your family, at least, and that makes a whole lot of difference. Before you get to your street and your taman.
Indeed.
Thanks.
Indeed.
Thanks. And then all the best with the book. Do check out Fairhaven, and of course, you've been watching the Shift Asia.